I've been involved in a number of cases where the question comes up of how to figure crop loss. And I've had a recent experience where there was a lot of discussion before the project started construction about how it should be figured. Our recommendation is generally use the county averages from Cooperative Extension for yield and for prices, unless the farmer can prove through other reporting, if they're reporting for crop insurance, for example, and they have records of what their yields are, and they want to use that, and they're legitimate figures, we think that's fine. And as far as prices go, if they can prove that they can get a higher price. So that's kind of what we think. We don't get involved in the crop compensation issue directly. We just kind of give some guidelines to landowners and companies just to work with. But the one thing I would say is that in this recent case, there was nothing written down as to how the crop loss was going to be figured. So they started out with one method, then the company decided they didn't like that method because they thought the farmers were inflating their prices. So they decided they were going to use another method. They started asking farmers for 2 years income records. The farmers weren't comfortable with turning over their income tax returns to the company. And so the next step, the way the easement was written, was that if they couldn't reach agreement, they had to go to arbitration. Well, that meant that the landowner was going to have to pay for an attorney when they went to arbitration. So my takeaway message from all that, after seeing, and it still hasn't been resolved, is that if I were a landowner, if I was a farmer, and I was contemplating the crop compensation issue, I think I would have in my easement some language that said exactly how the crop compensation was going to be calculated, so that everybody knew it was in writing, and the rules couldn't be changed partway through the process. And hopefully, as a landowner, you avoid arbitration, because the arbitration can probably be fairly expensive for you. So that's the one thing I would recommend, is that you reach an agreement on how you're going to figure the crop compensation ahead of time, and that you have that in writing, so that hopefully you don't have to worry about arbitration. So, any questions?
I've got a couple. One, would liming be the normal part of restoration?
Yes, liming, seed, fertilizer, yeah.
It'd be a good idea in a lot of the places they're going through.
Right. And
The other one, a lot of the walls are going to be bulldozed now, the stone walls. It's a heck of a job to rebuild them, do they?
some projects they do, some landowners don't want them rebuilt. From my experience has been that usually that's something that's, again, put in writing, that if you want the walls rebuilt, they get rebuilt.
What about where you're going through old fields and on patches with cultivators, or you're going through shrubs or old pasture, or even pioneer hardwoods? Do they do any separating, or do they just dig it, put the pipe in and cover it?
Typically, they don't separate in anything that's not designated as agricultural land. They don't have to. In some cases, they will. Some contractors have actually gotten so they like to do that because they can get a seating established better.
Is it negotiable, or is it?
As a landowner, I would say anything's negotiable. I think if I were a landowner and I had land like that and I wanted it to get seeded back properly, I would, that's something I would, yeah.
You're talking about agricultural land, what about woodlots?
We got a gentleman here that's going to talk about the woodlot concerns, so I'll leave that for him.
What happens if, after this is in for a few years, you get a flood like we've had the last couple of years here, and you get a foot to 18 inches of topsoil wash out, which on the other pipeline has been a case where I think if anyone went and measured, I'm not sure the pipe would be quite deep enough. Originally what the specs were. Is there any, get them to haul in any topsoil or anything to bring that depth back up to where it should be?
I would say probably, and I'll let the company speak to this, if there's an impact that's fairly immediately after construction, and it's it's a combination of the construction and restoration measures and the flooding, then the company definitely would be responsible for, from an agricultural perspective, restoring it so it could be farmed. If it starts to get quite a ways beyond restoration, and you get a weather event like that, then it probably becomes more of an issue of pipeline safety. So I would think that they have to maintain a certain level of cover over that pipe, and wouldn't be able to have a void there along the trench line, so I would think that would have.
That is true. It is a safety issue that we would have to address.
How would all this construction over this long period of time affect people who have hunting on their land?
Hunting?
Yeah.
Well, of course, everyone working out there is always warned about, you know, hunting season, and as far as from the landowner side of it, if you want to go out and hunt and there's people out there building a pipeline, you know, it's certainly something that everybody has to be careful and be aware of and so on. Depending on your property and the size of it, it may not be possible if you have a fairly small parcel and the pipeline goes right through the middle of it.
How about if you have a fairly large parcel and it goes right through the middle of it?
Well, there again, it depends, you know, every situation's different, but,
Because you can't get a straight answer from anybody about where that's gonna happen.
well, where the pipeline's gonna go, you mean?
Yeah.
It's early. And that's not uncommon. We're gonna have input on concerns we have with agriculture, where we may want get shifted one way or another. to
I'm
protect-
getting the impression too that this is not a good time to go back into the beef business. Because I think I just wasted a lot of money fencing my property along the road.
Well, there again, it depends. If the decision's made, ultimately, to go through where you just fenced, they'll have to repair the fence.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going into a major beef operation, which I think of that as Delaware County's future, not dairy. And Cornell seems to still think dairy is the major thing, but I'm seeing beef in the future. And I'm concerned about the use of the land. It's,
I mean, you could graze your cattle right over the pipeline.
after it's done.
Right.
It's during the course of, you know, any
During the
given
course
length
of
of
the,
time.
you're talking over a couple of year periods.
No,
so-
the construction would only take a matter of months. And certainly any given property, it's gonna be less
Did you
than
ever
that.
dig dirt in Delaware County?
There's not dirt,
I
there's
have-
stone.
I can't say that.
Let's do another
Okay.
question.
But
How
once
do
it's
you
been
know that-
disrupted,
that-
it's gonna.
Takes about a day to
Go
dig
through
a
Delaware
1-foot
County.
trench, 100 feet long,
I understand.
if you're
Oh,
lucky.
rock.
Well, that's
You're gonna
certainly,
blast it, or
Yeah.
you're gonna change the route of the pipeline?
They will blast if they've got it.
Well,
And
that's all.
they were talking, what you're talking, the 36-inch depth.
well, 48,
48 and A.
I've got rocks. When we got the foundation for our house, I've got rocks under the head of my foundation. That tells me that on our property there in Delaware County, okay, everybody blasts. That's what we grow in Delaware County, is rock.
no, and I've seen it, I've been out looking at it.
You're gonna blast that.
Well, as you recall, I showed you one photo there of rock on the topsoil.
That was their little.
But, well, that was blasted, that rock was not, that was blasted rock.
Delaware County Circle.
So, you know, it's been done, and whether it's blasted or ripped with an excavator or what, pipeline has been put
I don't
through
want
that.
somebody blasting on my.
Well, I'm just saying, there's been a lot of pipeline projects where they've had to deal with that, so. Any other?
Questions?
Joe Boyle, assessor for Harpersfield. What will the assessment be for lineal foot on the pipeline?
Oh, I'm not, that's way outside my area of expertise.
Well, it doesn't pay taxes.
I'll leave that to the company.
I wanted to ask about the rocks. When I saw those big piles of rocks,
Yeah.
do they, I'm sure they're not gonna put them back on the pipelines, because they're not gonna want all those rocks grating and grinding around on
Right,
there.
right. The rock
So
gets-
will they remove them or look for areas?
The rock
to
gets
dump
hauled
them?
to an approved disposal site.
Okay.
It has to be, some landowners, some farmers have.
They
have
might wanna keep the
want-
rocks?
In a barnyard area, for example.
Right.
I've seen that done. They do have to get approval from the various regulatory agencies like FERC and DEC. They want to
Well,
make
they
sure
have to
that.
get, when they take that kind of rocks out, don't they have to like get a mining permit or something?
No, that's part of the construction, removal of that rock. But the disposal.
But it could go either way. You could either keep the rocks if you want them or have them totally taken away.
Right, yeah. But if they want to dispose of them, if the landowner wants them, and you reach an agreement to where they're gonna be disposed on the property, they still have to have the approval from various agencies to make sure that they don't get dumped in a wetland or something. So, that's the only.
Okay, one more question. When they take all these rocks out, you've just lost volume. Then are they gonna bring in dirt to compensate for
Yeah,
the space?
yeah, I mean, they've got to backfill the trench back to original, profile, so if there's that volume of rock that's hauled away, they would have to replace it with soil.
When they bring in the dirt, we had this conversation the day at the Devonport Town Hall, that some of the roads right now are fragile, let's say, for big, heavy trucks and stuff like that, bringing in dirt and stuff like that, especially at my road, and several others. How are they gonna, right now they're gonna be putting up something that, and especially in the spring, that you can't even bring the big trucks over, my road at all.
Well, that's something the company and the municipalities have to discuss and figure out how they're gonna deal with, because you saw the size of the trucks hauling the pipe, they put a bit of weight to that pipe, so that's something that the municipalities would bring to the attention of the company, and then the company would have to address that for them.
Would that be the Devonport Town Hall or something?
Yeah, if it's a town road or a county road.
Right, it's town road, town's not county.
So the pipeline people, if the assessor asked the question, do they negotiate town by town the assessed value of that line, or how does that work? Jim, you want?
I know that we're gonna be putting out an economic impact statement that's gonna be available, I believe, for our open house. I believe the assessors will be working with our folks to determine what the assessed value is on a county by county basis. I'm not a tax expert by any stretch, so I probably have to defer that question to somebody at a later date. That'd be at our open house at the time. Just not my expertise. But we do pay taxes on the pipeline.
We do pay for the appraisers. Pipeline company does. Thank you.
Is there one more question over here?
You talk about removing the rock. I've seen them bring in Aussies to pad the ditch.
Right.
Pad the ditch, they separate the rock, and then they bring in rock crushers, and they crush the rock. And the rock doesn't leave, it's just crushed.
Well, and that can work in agricultural areas. If the rock is crushed fine enough, it could be used for backfill.
I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it all along the Millennium Line.
Right.
I spent 2 years on that.
Right, and that can work. Our main concern is that we not have rocks that, let's say, 4 inches and larger, that are put back in the trench within 2 feet of the surface, because eventually
So
they'll
they can do
be.
anything with the screening.
Pardon?
They can do anything by regulating the screening
Right,
on the Aussies.
right, yeah, so the rock could be crushed.
Okay, we're all set? Okay, Matt will be with us if you have questions after. Now, another huge issue that we'll talk about this afternoon is forestry and how it affects our forestry resource. And with us today is Walter Frabell. He comes to us from Waterville, New York, and he is a forestry expert in many respects. He's worked with these issues for quite a few years, and he should be able to give you a good idea of how we can work with the forestry resource. So you're on, and you're welcome to come over here. Would you like a microphone? I have a portable mic, so, okay, so we want everybody to hear.
Thank you. When you purchase a home or land, you can basically do nothing with it. You can conform to the existing house and land forever with no change whatsoever. With some abilities, you can remodel and reconform the house, and work towards a positive goal, likes, desires, and needs of you and your family. You're going to have an outlay of money, taxes, and expenses. You could hire a workman to come in without any thought whatsoever of your ownership. What the matters are, be at the mercy and depend on the workman solely for whatever he finally builds and obtains for you. Tell him, here's the location, here's a building, the door is open, unlocked, go and make me something. Likely results of that are probably going to be less than stellar. You're going to have windows or no windows, or windows that are not sized and use that you need, fixtures with no pipes, furnace with no heat, exit doors on the second floor only, etc., etc., etc. Upon completion, you pay, you take receipt, and you live in it lovingly. Or you can work with a knowledgeable, qualified consultant and achieve your goals. And your goals can be distinctively different than your next door neighbor with possibly close to the same ownership. If you have or buy land and you have abilities, you can work with goals and desires for that land, that forested property, that acreage. Or you can look to consultants and convey your thoughts to them, have them build or create for you exactly as you have envisioned. Your property is identical. When you buy this property, you try to work towards the same sort of objectives. You buy it for a goal. You regularly outlay money in the form of taxes and expenses. Over the long term, you can do something positive, negative, or nothing at all. Just as in the previous home scenarios. If you have knowledge of stewardship and work your land and your forest to positive gain yourself, you can achieve your goals rather quickly. Or, if you're not quite as knowledgeable or have the abilities, you can seek assistance from consultants. You can achieve free assistance from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation through staff employees who are classified as service foresters in many of the DEC regions. Or you can pay private consulting foresters for the same assistance for guidance managing your plants, trees, wildlife, water, soils, minerals, gas underground, to your desires, needs, and benefits through the creation of a stewardship plan, which identifies your ownership resources and how they can be best maximized to your desires, benefits, and goals. I've heard a lot of talk here today about property ownership and such. Who here has an active forest stewardship plan that they're using to manage their property? Or who might be here today is actively involved in the New York State DEC 480A tax incentive program? Those are options that are available to you. It's a systematic approach to your property, identifies what you have and what you might want to do or possibly can do with your property depending on what exists. Suggested forest work is done by contract. And the contract has clauses beneficial towards positive growth and benefit to your above ground property. Every time work is done, you should also enter into an agreement this way. When working with your forest or having somebody impact your forest, you need to know how the trees are going to be removed and handled. They should be definitively cut to lengths. They should be definitively dropped and removed and placed in piles by species so that you can deal with them, remediate the site, and sell them at some future time without any unnecessary encumbrance. When you're doing this, a lot of this procedure has already been identified through the creation of a forest stewardship plan for your property. This is the documentation that identifies your ownership, what you have, what the potential is, and what you can do with it. When you have a stewardship plan, the stewardship plan for your property is like your foot in the crack in the door. Having a stewardship plan for your property has identified your ownership above and beyond the norm and provides you with direction and resources for your assistance. There's monies available, whether it be a grant program to install a pond in a wetland area, possibly you have water due to cold water springs. You can harbor them and raise fish. You can work these programs with funding from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Wild Turkey Federation, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, even the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for documentation and tax status on designated wetlands. For those that you don't, or those of you that don't have these resources already, these are resources that you could have availed yourself to and can still avail yourself to for financial benefit and support in your property. Working with these agencies, especially the DEC, if you wish to go the free route, they provide quality documentation, quality documents, and I'm a forest landowner, former farmer, free is good. That provides the official documentation you'll need. It creates an initial baseline for your property, identifying your species, your ownership, your wildlife, the health and the potential of your ownership. For those of you that already have a stewardship plan and wanted to take it a step further, you can enroll your forested land in a tax reduction incentive program through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and reap further benefits on a 10-year schedule. It is a rolling 10-year tax schedule. It consists of active stewardship on your property conducted by the owner. The owner, under the auspices of the New York State DEC and with the assistance of a consulting forester, will conduct scheduled work. You're given work to be done, deadlines, and inspection from the DEC at designated periods to be assured that you've completed the work that is suggested in order to maintain your tax status. This particular program needs no less than a minimum of 50 acres. There are some considerations. Anybody that's involved with gas and has some of this 488 property taken out of forested production, there are penalties incurred. You should have a tax clause in your contract with your gas company that any land removed from the 480A, which is subject to penalties, the penalties and all incidental costs are covered and paid by the gas company. The expenses for a consultant when land is removed, the original stewardship plan needs to be amended and rewritten to reflect the reduction in acreage and the reduction in goals, or the change in goals. The cost incurred for the amendment of the stewardship plan should also be paid for and covered by the gas company. Other considerations are trees or any property, any forested land that needs to be cut for a right-of-way through your property. When the trees are cut, it is considered a harvest and there will be a stumpage removal tax owed. This needs to be paid by the gas company. At any time, you should make sure these costs are covered at no expense to yourself, so you don't incur a long-term penalty over the life of the 10-year agreement with the New York State DEC. When work is done on your property, the topography may be changed or amended somewhat. Roads need to be taken into consideration when this happens. You may incur, as Matt alluded to, an issue with moisture and erosion. So roads need to be built and configured so that you have erosion control devices. And plus, when they're initially installed, need to be installed with suitable basage so that they're capable of handling loads. Don't rush into this before thoroughly examining what you have and what needs to be done, and have discussions take place regarding it. The other considerations are, I mentioned there's a 50-acre minimum acreage to enroll in this tax incentive program. If for some reason the gas company needs and takes a portion of it, which ultimately incurs a reduction in your minimum acreage, you want to make sure that you don't drop below that 50-acre threshold, because if it does, you will incur penalties on the entirety of the 50 acres, not just the portion that may be above and beyond the 50 acres that was initially needed. Work can be done, as I mentioned, quite easily, simply, and systematically with the use of the assistance provided New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Service foresters. Also, a professional consulting forester can also advise you and support and assist you towards this goal. When this work is done, passes through your property, it can be done in such a way that you do maintain your 480A status and your tax reduction incentive that you've worked so hard and long to achieve. With proper planning, you can have beneficial results all the way around. Gas companies and property owners both need to express, work towards, and achieve due diligence for responsible research, study, and approved work, because the bottom line is we're not the owners, we're just the temporary stewards. Our ownership, our properties, very shortly will be passed on And all these resources will go to our children and our children's children. I've heard a lot of concern about maintaining the heritage that we have grown up with and now own and will be someday soon passing on. Basically and simply put, you can phrase it, do unto others. Thank you.
Any questions about forestry?
For people who are not in these programs, I know I have logs with on every 8 or 9 years. And when they come through and they're gonna cut wood, okay, who determines the value of that wood?
You can still determine it now by contacting the DEC or hiring a paid consultant to create a stewardship plan for your property, because when that occurs, it will establish a baseline, a starting line for your property. What you have on your property, the soils, the trees, the wildlife, the value now, and then from this baseline you can determine over the future by growth potential what you can ultimately achieve from your property. So when you're in negotiations, you have a starting point. I heard the term negotiations. You will enter into negotiations, but you know where you started, so you can use this in your negotiations.
At this particular point, we don't know where this line is gonna go through the property. A certain amount of trees are gonna have to be removed. Now, we're supposed to get compensated for those trees. There's supposed to be, somebody is supposed to put a value on these trees. Who puts the value on it, and can it be negotiated, or can it be challenged?
When you obtain the stewardship plan, they will put the price on the trees, and you'll have knowledge at that time. From this point on, this is what the trees are worth now, this is what the potential is in the future.
Assuming you don't go into this program, where do you stand on something like that? The trees are still removed.
Like the scenario of the owner who has a building that does nothing, or has somebody come in and do what they want, you're going to end up with who knows what.
We hire a local forester. We would hire a local forester and we would present that value to you. You would tell us what you think about it.
And that could be challenged.
Yes, it can. Absolutely.
So you can do nothing. You can have somebody come in and tell you what they're now worth, or you can start even before we address this particular future meeting, where you meet with the officials that can provide you with the assistance, give you documentation of your property, maps, listings, price figures, suggested goals, and such. You're under no obligation, and one path, the documents are free. And icing on the cake, if you have this free stewardship document, now you can apply to the federal government, if you're a farmer, for money through the forestry provisions in the Farm Bill. If you're a farmer or a forest owner, through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, there are incentive programs for various types of wildlife to entice and enhance the habitat for these species. They will pay you to do this work. You can receive money to put in ponds. You can receive money to, through the DEC, some of the forestry programs, to remove cull trees from your property to enhance the growth, accelerate the growth of the better trees that are left. All this work is at your disposal if you simply make a phone call, obtain the free document to get your foot in the door, to reach out and take the money. And the bottom line is, I've done this myself. I'm a former farmer. I'm now a forest landowner. I am a certified tree farm. I've taken part and received these monies for these programs.
Obviously, at some point, this thing is gonna go through a stand of timber. And obviously, where you're gonna be working at, every tree is gonna be cut to that 110-foot width. who does that? And it looks as though there's gonna be kind of a narrow time frame to get it done.
Right. We would have, the first group would go out and they would fell the trees. And then there would be a window before the main construction would come in and take out whatever's left on the property, the stumps, and do the clearing. The landowner, after we have our permits to do the cutting, is more than welcome to go and collect those trees and sell them at market. But there'll be a window, and we'll, I don't know exactly what it is right now, but I think as we get further in the process, we will to describe that to you a bit better.
Yeah, it doesn't affect me because I'm not in the corridor. Somebody, so in other words, you would be doing the cutting and then basically you get a log buyer in to.
No, it's up to the
No.
landowner. We would cut the trees.
Those are your trees.
You can, we pay for the trees, we cut them down. If the landowner wants to take them and sell them at market, that's great, he'll have the window to do that. He
What
doesn't
value
choose to
do you
do
pay
so.
for the trees?
What's that?
What value do you pay for the trees, before or after the sale value?
We pay what the timber appraiser tells us, that's what our offer will be based upon a timber appraiser on the area of trees that we.
So in theory, a landowner gets paid twice, if he can sell the trees?
If he
after
can do
the
that, yes, he
grading?
can. But he has to get the trees off his property before construction.
One of the things you're gonna have to negotiate for is what, say a cherry tree this big isn't worth much. 20 years from now.
Right, but I think that the idea is that, you know, when we're paying 100% of the value of the land, the idea is that the landowner could buy a similar piece of land nearby with the similar trees and so on.
Go ahead.
The trees that are removed will be removed forever in that corridor, right? I mean, you can't plant trees.
Correct.
So,
The 50-foot operating easement, not the 110, right, the 50 feet.
but so there's a value of trees, let's say, on that 50 foot or whatever length it is. And if you were in the forestry program and you may harvest your timber every 9 years, so what you're forbidden to do is to grow any trees in that 50-foot corridor, whatever length it is.
Right, correct.
So
So we're paying for that 50-foot corridor.
One time, my point is that there's a value of trees in the future that are never going to be growing there again.
Right, but another piece of property could be purchased which can grow those trees on it and harvest those.
Takes a long time to grow a tree.
Right, but we pay for what those values of trees are at
But
that time.
they would be another piece of property purchased, but it would have to be something that would be able to replace on, say, a 9-year cycle. Equivalent amount. So, and that would be something you'd have to factor in an evaluation when the person was compensated for the property.
Sir, go ahead.
Back again, is there any value set on the pipeline per foot, what it's worth? Millions? Billions?
You have the cost of the project.
Matt?
Did you want to know, are you asking how much it's gonna cost to install the pipeline?
What is it worth, or what does it cost per foot? So we have
I
an idea.
can't do the math in my head.
Okay.
I can tell you the 120-mile pipeline with 4 metering stations and 1 compressor station, the current budget is approximately $750 million. Divided by 120.
That'd be a start.
But then you have 5 facilities, the 4-meter station and the compressor station.
I expect you will get some guidance before.
I will.
We'll be asking whether they're together or
I mean, that will be, that's public information, the cost of project.
He's looking for advice as to how to assess it. I think it's really too soon for anybody to answer.
We have a question in the back. We have a question in the back, Jim?
On that price you gave, how much is?
Going back to the 488 section?
You separate the two between the pipeline and the meters?
Yeah, don't hold me to this, I'm talking off the top of my head, like I can't do math, my memory's not so good anymore. The 750 million, the compressor station is approximately $65 million. And in aggregate, the 4-meter stations are about 30 million
These are
in aggregate. So, just rounding up, about 100 million for the above-ground facilities, and then somewhere between the 650 to 670 for the pipeline.
The life of the pipeline is indefinite.
The what?
The life of the pipeline is indefinite.
That's our current stance right now.
Okay, because we have one now that was 1964, and they're beating on our doors to get the assessment reduced, claiming depreciation,
And yet they're using it heavier now. Now they're putting
and
high
they've doubled the
pressure
flow.
through it instead of the low pressure that it was originally designed for.
So, you know, just asking
Hey,
questions.
that pipeline really is deteriorated.
Yeah, but only for the people that are excluded.
How many years can you depreciate this pipeline, this 30?
From an accounting perspective, I'm not an expert on accounting, but somewhere in the 30 to 40 year range.
It's not 60 years?
I'm not sure. But on our other pipelines that have been, the one I keep talking about, our transport pipeline that's been in service for 52 years, we're still paying ad valorem and property taxes on that pipeline, and it's above ground facility.
I think as far as the assessment, it'll never go below 50% of the value.
I'm not, we have tax experts at Williams, but I am not a tax expert.
Okay, let's
If
get
you're
to
joining on in Sahara to an existing pipeline,
Yes.
why do you need this 120 miles? Why
Well-
can't you use something that's already existed
Well-
for that 120 miles?
Well, it's coming, if you look at your map, both the Iroquois system goes north and south, and the Tennessee gas system goes pretty much north and south.
Yeah.
So for us to get gas from Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, to those two pipelines, we have to travel in a southwest to northeast direction. So there is no interstate gas pipeline in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania.